Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. I am officially no longer in my in-laws' house recording from their spare bedroom. So, first episode, first guest back in my own home, back in this home in-home studio, and had to make it a big one, of course. Joining me to do so is our guy, Daniel Popper of The Athletic. Popper, thanks for joining us tonight, man. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. I got to say that beat on the lead in, I was like, I was vibing. Where'd you guys get that?
That was courtesy of Canva Premium. I don't know if you've heard of Canva, but that's the site we use all to make all of our graphics and things like that. So
Nice. That's a vibe. Big
yeah,
fan. Shout out
I'm
to the
glad.
production.
Appreciate it. So, we just got the news that of course, the Chargers and Dolphins game has been flexed out, but we're gonna start here on a bit of a fun one because I have a bit of a bone to pick with you about a take that you had on your recent Hops with Pop, and
All
that
right.
is that Elf is the undisputed best Christmas movie of all time. What's up with that, man? We got the Jim Carrey's Grinch just being slept on. I mean, I know you mentioned Home Alone, but why Elf as the undisputed GOAT?
Well, it's just my favorite. I honestly, I walked it back right after I said that because people started putting their favorite Christmas movies into the chat. And I was like, oh my God, I probably said that before I had really thought about it. It's the only Christmas movie that my fiance and I own. We bought it like 2 years ago on Amazon. So we own it. And so we watch it like 7 times every single Christmas season. And I think it's heartwarming. Will Ferrell is just fantastic. And then Peter Dinklage is in it too.
Yeah, shout out.
From Game of Thrones. He's fantastic in it. I just think it's heartwarming. It's original. The writing's really good. Like, it's not like a cheesy Christmas movie. Like, I really feel like, after I watch it, like, I feel really sentimental and I'm like, okay, I'm in the mood for Christmas. Now, like, I probably was a little strong with the take. Like, I think there are a lot of great Christmas movies out there, and like, people threw Home Alone out there. I love Home Alone. So it's like, it's definitely my favorite, but I think I said it was non-negotiable. It's probably a little bit negotiable.
Just a little bit. It's all good. I love the Elf, man, as well. It's a top 5 Christmas movie for me as well. I'm attached to Jim Carrey's Grinch.
That's a great one. Yeah, see, I hadn't even thought about that one. You threw that one out. That's also a fantastic one as well.
Yeah, and there are some newer movies out there that have come out recently that are good ones. The animated Grinch with Benedict Cumberbatch, also a one that Brooke and I really like as well. So,
I don't know if I've seen that.
Yeah, you'll have to check it out then.
It's like the old animated Grinch, like the old one, but I don't think I've seen the new one.
Yeah, no, the new one has the score, I guess, is all produced by Pharrell, excuse me.
Oh, Pharrell.
And so there's one on there with Tyler the Creator that actually is like one of my favorite Christmas songs. Yeah.
Oh wow. All right.
So it's
I gotta
it's a
check
good
that
one.
out.
There you go. Add it to your list for sure. So, like I said, obviously here to talk about some Chargers football here. Of course, Pop, your initial reaction to the Chargers and Dolphins getting flexed to Sunday Night Football as instead of the Chiefs and Broncos game that was supposed to be that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is sick of watching the Broncos play in primetime. I think literally that's what it comes down to, because it's not just that they're losing. Like, they just play a really ugly brand of football. Now it's coming out that Nathaniel Hackett is probably done after one season. It's just unwatchable football. The defense is fantastic.
So
they're an elite defense, but people don't really like to watch defense. Most people. I like to watch defense. I'm sure you like to watch defense, Steven.
Yep.
My father loves to watch defense. Grew up watching the 80s Giants and Bill Belichick back in the 80s, but most people aren't going to sit there and love like a 13-10 slugfest. So you figured it was going to get flexed out, and then just the storylines of that game are through the roof, right? You have the Tua Herbert, same draft class. Tua is coming into his own under Mike McDaniel, playing really well. And so, a lot of the storylines sort of write themselves there, and it sort of makes sense. Two teams that are at this point in the playoff hunt. Dolphins a little more in the hunt than the Chargers at this point, but sort of made sense.
Yeah, you have to figure that every game down the stretch on Sunday Football is in danger of getting flexed out in place of a more playoff inclined kind of matchup. So I'm excited for it, man. There's going to be a ton of great storylines, ton of great matchups. Hopefully, we can get Joey Bosa back in time for that game. That'd be fantastic. But I wanted
if that happens. Just saying.
Really?
Yeah, I think I threw out the Dolphins game. Just the way it's trending right now. Like, we asked again on Monday to Brandon Staley, still no update. Probably means he's not going to be back at practice this week. We still haven't seen him in the locker room. So, maybe week 15 Titans. I don't know. I would be surprised if he's back week 14, just the way things are sort of trending right now. But we'll see. I mean, basically, like they called it a torn groin, but the surgeon he went to see in Philadelphia is really a sports hernia surgeon. I know Staley initially put like a 6 to 10 week timetable on it. That was probably referring to like when he's going to be back at practice. And so 10 weeks would be, you know, that week of the Dolphins game. So maybe he's back at practice that week, but you know how they've done it with injuries is like, we want a guy to practice a full week before he plays. And so, at this point, I'd be surprised if he's back for that. Maybe Titans week 15 is probably the earliest. I wouldn't be surprised if he's back.
Yeah, I know this upcoming Friday is officially 8 weeks from the surgery.
Right. So September 29th was the surgery. So Friday would be 8 weeks. So that gives you an idea. Like 10 weeks is probably the back end of like when he would return to practice, not necessarily return to game, if that makes things a little bit clearer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know people ask us all the time about Joey Bosa's return, so I appreciate the clarity there, and I'm sure you've gotten that question a bunch too.
Never gotten the question.
I don't know about you, man, but we're so sick of talking about injuries this year, and it's just like every other week, and now this week again, we're going to be talking about Trey Pipkins potentially not playing this week with his MCL injury, kind of just popping back up again, and it's just been a season of never-ending injury talk, man.
Yeah. It's just, I feel terrible for Trey, right? Because he's put so much work in to get to this point. You know, I wrote all about how he went down to Dallas to work with Duke Manyweather all off season, and he was a different player. Like we all saw it before he hurt his knee in that Cleveland game. Like he was looking like a long-term solution at right tackle. I give him a ton of credit for putting the work in to get himself to this point and take all of those tools that we've seen and turn it into like real legitimate production, both as a pass protector and run blocker. And so then he, you know, this is the third time now that he's had some sort of setback with the MCL. You know, he initially hurt it against Cleveland, and it's just guys rolling up on his knee, you know, and it's like completely unlucky things. You can go rewatch the play, you know, from Sunday, and it's just he's pass protecting on the right side, and someone falls over and rolls into the knee. It's happened 3 times now, and it's just really unlucky because he keeps working himself back to the point where he feels like he can play. And he's battling through this thing, and he just keeps getting really unlucky in terms of 300-pound men rolling into his knee. And it's already, you know, the structure is already not there because he has the sprained MCL, and it's just unlucky event after unlucky event in a contract year, which is just, you know, really cruddy way to go about it.
Absolutely. And when he was healthy, he was playing fantastic football out there.
Yeah,
and I thought that he was
100%.
somebody that, you know, had really stabilized the right tackle position. And now he's just, you know, all these injuries and things like that. So, you know, I kind of want to talk about the offensive unit in general, not from the sense that everybody else wants to talk about it, of course, but I'm curious to just kind of get your thoughts about how they've kind of approached all of these moving parts, because, you know, we talk about, you know, Corey Linsley being in and out of the lineup as well. And obviously Jamari Salyer, very different tackle from Rashawn Slater. And the Chargers kind of ranking in that, you know, 20 to 25 range in terms of like ESPN's block win rates. How would you assess how the Chargers have kind of adapted to this new offensive line? And obviously protecting Justin Herbert has been kind of a struggle the last few weeks.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. You know, in some ways they've done well, right? Like I think you have to give the coaching staff a lot of credit for how they've helped Jamari Salyer sort of move in there. I think we've seen over the last 2 or 3 weeks that like he's not the guy that maybe everyone thinks he is based on, you know, what they're watching. You know, he when he's on an island, he's not Rashawn Slater. You know, and like in order for him to play at a high level, they do have to scheme stuff up, whether that's pocket movement, whether that's chipping to his side. And the games that he's played really well, I think the protection plan has been really good. They've been able to stay ahead of the sticks, and they've been able to keep themselves out of those, you know, known passing situations. But the fact that they've been able to plug him in, and he's been a serviceable, functional player there at left tackle, even though he's given up a couple sacks over the last couple of weeks, I think the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit. But the run game just isn't there. You know, Justin Herbert is always going to be fantastic at avoiding sacks. I think the last couple of weeks that sack per pressure rate has gone up a little bit. But for the most part, he's done an excellent job of sort of mitigating the pressure when it has come. But the run game just isn't there, you know, and like I've had a number of conversations with Corey Linsley about this, just trying to see like how do you figure it out? And it's like, he said something really interesting to me last week. It's like, you're moving players in and out. And yeah, those players bring different stuff to the table in a positive sense, but they also present different problems. And so when you have the same 5 guys out there, you know what the problems are, you know what the weaknesses of the players are, and you can address those weaknesses when they come up because you know exactly what they are. But when you're plugging different guys in there, and it's Foster Sarell at right tackle, and it's Will Clapp in there, the problems are different. And then a lot of the running game is how these players are blocking together, right? And so something Corey brought up that was interesting, right? In the San Francisco game, he and Zion saw something in the game, and then afterwards when they were watching the film, they're like, hey, we need to adjust our footwork like the littlest bit on this combo block on this specific play, and it's going to open things up. And then the following week against the Chiefs, they execute that double team, that combo block, and it works out perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Corey Linsley's out, and then Will Clapp's in, and then all the work that you've done to make that little fix to execute that one play is out the window, and you have to start back at square one. And I think that's a lot of the issues with the running game. And then, a lot of it is game script too. And it's like you want to talk in these generalities, but in reality, not you specifically, but I'm saying people like to talk in these generalities, right? But it's like a couple plays. Eckler has a good run there initially, and then there's a couple plays. Isaiah Spiller's a 3-yard run, and then they get blown up on that pitch play. That's one play, and then all of a sudden it's a 3 and out, and you fall behind 10-0, and then all of a sudden the game script switches and you can't run as much. When you only get off 9 runs, though, like how much can you really fix? And you have guys moving in and out. It's like, how can you address these problems if you're only getting off 9 runs in a game? So, in terms of the pass protection, like I think it's been obviously up and down, but you trust the quarterback with his skill set to be able to mitigate a lot of that. I think the bigger issue in terms of these moving pieces is like getting the run blocking together. And that's not even mentioning the fact that, Gerald Everett's been in and out. Donald Parham's barely been there. The tight end blocking, which I'm sure you've seen on film.
It's so frustrating.
Freaking disaster, man. I mean, it's an absolute disaster. And that's big because, you run to the edge, and if the tight end's getting blown off the ball, like the 5 offensive linemen can be blocking it up perfectly, and the run's going to go for -2 yards. And then obviously we haven't even talked about, the receivers coming in and out, and what a key part Keenan Allen is in the run blocking. And then he comes back in there, and all of a sudden then Trey Pipkins is out. And so say I haven't talked to these guys about it, but say Keenan Allen and Trey Pipkins are on the same page in terms of how to block something, and all of a sudden that guy's out, and then all of a sudden different problems arise with Foster Sarell. So I think when the bigger issue with the guys moving in and out has been with the run blocking, because in terms of pass protection, you can do a lot to schematically to help those guys. And then Justin Herbert's always going to be really good at avoiding pressure and then making plays under pressure.
Yeah, he's so fantastic at that. But, getting back to your point about the run game a little bit, I felt like that San Francisco game, you could really kind of tell that they were just trying to do a little bit too much and trying to figure out a little bit too much. And then, once Kansas City came rolling in, it was a simpler, more, condensed approach. And I felt like it worked, to their advantage in that game. And Eckler was able to have really his best game for quite some time, at least in terms of rushing and production. I want to shift gears a little bit here and talk about a more positive development that I don't think is really getting enough attention nationally. I mean, there's a lot of fantasy football relevance with this, but Josh Palmer has really come into his own over the last few weeks. And we're talking about somebody that's had 2 100-yard games. I mean, he had another 50-yard performance this Sunday. What's kind of the vibe around Josh Palmer these days? And really, what kind of advantages do you see that presenting when Mike Williams gets back in a few weeks?
Yeah, I think we've seen, the vision that they had for Josh Palmer when they drafted him, right? A guy that can play in a lot of different spots, can win outside in contested ball situations, yards after the catch. Like he even was able to access the deep part of the field. Like that's not, the top part of his skill set. But, I think we've seen the player that they thought he was going to be, a guy that could, run really good routes, create separation, make plays in contested catch situations. And I think they're really excited about what he could be. And he does give you a lot of flexibility because we've seen him fill a lot of roles, right? Like when Keenan's been out, even that Giants game last year, but even this year, you can see him that he can operate in the slot and he presents a mismatch in there because of his size. And then we've also seen him execute well on the outside, which is where Mike Williams plays, even isolated as that X receiver. So it gives them flexibility in terms of scheme on the field, and also gives them flexibility moving forward because they could potentially move on from Keenan Allen after this season. And, that fits together, right? If Mike's healthy playing on the outside at X, and then you can have Josh Palmer as sort of your inside slot guy. So they're really excited about it. I think like the ball security has been a little bit of a weird issue. Like he's put the ball on the ground a number of times. Like he obviously, had that fumble that Michael Bandy recovered, but he lost the ball early in that game as well. He was down down by contact before the ball came out. That's the only like knock I would have against it. But you're seeing the production. You're seeing him win against man coverage. And they're really excited about his development. And I think he's sort of on track for what they expected from him when they drafted him in the 3rd round last year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really fun to see him come on. And there was a lot of strong takes about Josh Palmer to start the season, but I mean, he had the knee injury and the second concussion and things like that. So I think now that he's healthy, we're really seeing, him come on strong.
Yep. 100%.
Have to get your thoughts here about the run defense, because you obviously wrote a great article yesterday about it with the yards per attempt on design rushes for the Chargers, worst since 2000 of any team in the Super Bowl era.
It could be worse than that because the data only goes back to 2000.
Yeah, right. It could be worse than that for sure. Obviously there's a lot of moving parts there. Obviously Austin Johnson's not playing anymore. Tito Ogbonia, Christian Covington, we all know this. How does this run defense get better in your eyes with the personnel that they currently have? Because this is, we're talking about upcoming matchups with Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. And, obviously the Dolphins have Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. So how do the Chargers go from worst in since 2000 to maybe like 28th in the NFL would be nice?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that Brandon Staley brought up was, creating 2-on-1s on the edge instead of 1-on-1s. And like you saw that James Conner run that went for 20 yards, that was just a straight up missed tackle by Asante Samuel Jr. I think early in the season when Austin Johnson was on the field, like I didn't think the run defense was that bad down to down. It was like one big play a game where they were giving up, 50-yard run where somebody missed the tackle on the back end and it was out the back door for a long gain. Like, I was calling them catastrophic explosives because that's really what they were. I think since Austin Johnson has gone down, it's been different. Like it's been a lot closer to what it was last year, which was, losing at the point of attack and giving up 5-6 yards a pop, and not necessarily like those catastrophic explosives that were skewing the numbers earlier in the season. And then a lot of it is coming to the edge. Like it isn't like it's a matchup league, as Brandon Staley said, and like it's not hard to see what's happening. Like Kyle Van Noy is not particularly stout on the edge as a run defender. He's certainly not Joey Bosa. That's not what they brought him in here to do, but he's being asked to do it because of injuries. And we can talk about roster construction and edge depth because we all had concerns about the edge depth coming into this season. And when you don't have a ton of depth at a position, usually you get exposed. It's just the football god's way, right?
Yeah.
The teams are attacking Kyle Van Noy. Like a lot of these long runs are coming at him. And then, if you don't have that stout player on the edge, like a Joey Bosa who's really going to set the edge and create penetration there, then your linebackers have to fit perfectly. And then your secondary players, if they're one-on-one, have to make a tackle on the edge. And that just hasn't happened. Kenneth Murray, and I've tried to defend Kenneth Murray because I think there are some things that he does really well on the football field. And I do like his skill set, but there are obviously shortcomings in his game, and he runs himself out of a lot of plays. And then on that 18-yard run from James Conner, like Drew Tranquill is usually really good about being in the right spot at the right time, but he got caught up in traffic, and that opened up a hole, and then that allowed it to be blocked up well on the outside with Derwin there. And then whichever corner was on the outside, I didn't see if it was Asante or Michael Davis. So how it gets better, like you got to put more guys at the line of scrimmage. Like that's how it worked against San Francisco. It was throwing these 6-man fronts up there with Derwin James on the edge like that. If you are up there at the line of scrimmage and your players can't make plays, you got, with the numbers you have up there, you got to put more numbers forward. The issue you get into is if a team can run it and pass it, and that's what you're going to have with the Dolphins, right? Like, Brandon Staley said about the Cardinals, like, listen, they have all these talented receivers. We really wanted to limit the pass game. I understand that, but like with the Dolphins, like if you're going to play that type of game and go into that game and be like, all right, we're going to take away Waddle or try and take away Waddle and Tyreek Hill in the passing game,
right?
Like, they will gash you. They will absolutely gash you. So the issue is if you throw more guys forward, a team that can do both is going to dominate you. And that's like the real issue right now. But the only way to create a 2-on-1 and add an extra number is to put more guys at the line of scrimmage. Right. So it's a tough situation. Like, you lose that many guys up front, it's going to obviously impact your rush defense. But, the other thing I'll say here, and not to rattle on here forever.
No,
But
you're
like,
good. Go for it.
I asked Brandon, just to get it on the record now at this point, at this stage in time, like what is the philosophy, like broadly, what is the philosophy with the run defense? Because he said in the past that, like, preventing explosive passes is what the entire defense is built around, right? Two deep safeties, a lot of shell coverage, roof on the coverage, as he said, and prevent those explosive plays. And like, I was basically like, what in a perfect world, how much are you giving up against the run? Because obviously you're going to dare teams to run a little bit when you're playing like that, but how much is too much? And he gave a really good answer. Like, it takes 8 5-yard runs to equal a 40-yard pass. And like, you have to start with that premise. So like, they're going to give up some rushing yards. That's never going to go away. Like, they're never going to be, a top 10 rushing defense. But the key is, like, can you not be the worst rushing defense since 2000? And like, that's the issue, is that I understand the philosophy. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. That's what the defense is going to be from a philosophical perspective. But you have to be a little bit better against the run. Like, you can't be this bad, or else you're not going to be able to play good defense.
Yeah, I know my biggest issue from the run defense standpoint, right, is like, I understand you're like, this is a passing league, and he is right, and you did the math right, the 24th pass defense versus the 24th run defense, and it checks out. Like, his logic is sound in that regard, but it's just from I think that mentality almost invites more attrition along the defensive line, because you're asking these defensive linemen to play that many more run snaps, because teams are just going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And I think we saw that a little bit against the 49ers, where, I mean, you're asking guys to play so many different snaps, so many different roles, and guys are just going to get gashed. They're going to get tired, and eventually it's just going to wear you down. So that's my issue from it, is that I think it's just a little bit more skewed than he thinks it is, because I do think that teams nowadays are starting to realize, like, hey, like, we can run the ball, like, legitimately whenever we want against light boxes, and we're just okay with it at this point.
Yeah, no, there's definitely like a shift happening where teams are like a little bit more willing to run the ball. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. At the end of the day, like, you can't be this bad. Like, that's really sort of where I'm at with it, So
yeah. And 2 years in a row, especially.
Yeah, and I think, like, the priority this offseason, right, was fixing this. Right? Like, that's what they spent on in free agency. They spent on JC too, but like, they spent on 2 interior defensive linemen in free agency. Those were like big signings for them. They drafted another one in the 5th round. They got Khalil Mack in here partly to help improve the run defense. And so to spend that much of your capital and that many resources into fixing a specific problem, having it not be fixed, even if injuries are a part of it, has to be super frustrating. The other thing I'll say is, like, in terms of the number of snaps, which I think is like a good point, because they played 41 snaps in the second half of that 49ers game. Part of it too is complementary football. Like, that's a cliche for a reason. Yeah. And so, like, part of that is that your offense is going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And so, like, that's part of it. If like the offense can't 100%. Possess the ball at all, that's going to feed into the number of snaps that your defense is playing. Like, but if the offense is able to string together some lengthy drives, then your defense can get rested up, and that's not as much of an issue. So you do have to look at, like, the whole football team and what's going on in terms of complementary football as well when you're making that point.
Yeah, that's another fantastic point here. Yeah. Kind of an extension off of the Brandon Staley conversation here. You did a great article breaking down Brandon Staley's 2-point conversion and how the Chargers got to that point. I'm curious to get your thoughts if that 2-point aggressive call maybe brings 2021 Brandon Staley a little bit out more over the last 6 weeks of the season.
In terms of 4th down decision making?
Yeah, in terms of being that aggressive guy that he was last year.
Yeah, I have to separate those two. I know that technically they're all part of game management, but like, he's always said, like, this is the first situation where they've ever gotten into where they've scored a potential tying touchdown on the road and had that opportunity. That's a decision he's going to make every single time, because he's always said in the past when they've been in those situations, like, if we had scored, I would have gone for 2. And they do a great job of scheming up these 2-point plays. Like, that was a brilliant call, and like, everyone can give Joe Lombardi as much slack as he wants, but like, and the beauty of it is that everyone, has learned what stick is, and so they're just constantly getting on him for calling stick over and over again. They never talk about it when it succeeds, only when it fails. And then here he is with a beautiful changeup off a tendency for the Chargers, which is running stick flat, and they run a changeup off of it. And so Does that 2-point conversion go down in that situation if they haven't put that tendency of stick flat over and over again on tape, including against the Chiefs when Justin Herbert threw the pick six? No, it doesn't. I was going to say maybe, but I'm going to say no. So listen, I think he's a different decision maker. I think I wrote that a couple of weeks ago. He's very clearly a different decision maker this year. I think a lot of it is how good the Chargers have been punting the football. Like, they're really good. They are the number one punt return unit, or punt defense, punt coverage unit in the league. They're giving up under 4 yards per return. That's number one in the entire NFL. So they felt like, okay, what do we need in a punter? We need a guy that can just get outrageous hang times. They bring in J.K. Scott. They get a couple young guys on the outside, and Dean Leonard and Jasir Taylor. A bunch of these other young guys that were, rookies last year are performing at a higher level, whether it's Nick Neiman and Eamon Agbongbemiga. They bring in Troy Reeder. They get Drew Tranquill on the punt unit as a starter on the defense, playing on special teams. And they've been really good in that area. So like last year, they were terrible. They're 25th in the league in punt EPA. So this year you have one of the best punt units in the league, and that's going to factor into things. So I don't think it indicates a shift. I would separate, 2-point calls, and that's
all right
from fourth down calls. I think the aggressive side of him is still in there, but I think the fact that the punt unit has been so good is factoring into some of these decisions on fourth down, like that 4th and 6 from the 48. Like, I think Ben Baldwin's model had that as, a strong go. I wish we had access to the Chargers modeling because a lot of it is guesswork, unfortunately. But, that's a perfect example. That's probably a place he goes for it last year. He doesn't this year. He's still able to win the game, but just focusing on the decision itself, there's a clear difference in terms of when he's going for it and when he's not. And I think a lot of it's related to how good the punt unit's been.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think people are kind of talking about it because everybody kind of thinks that it's like him trusting the defense a little bit.
It's the punt unit. I'm telling you, it's the punt unit.
And dude, Ryan Ficken is doing a fantastic job. I mean, the Chargers have been hovering around in top 10 special teams DVOA all season long. It's like, it's crazy. Like 3 different kickers have come through, and just like it doesn't matter. So Ryan Ficken deserves a ton of credit for what he has done in his first season as Chargers special teams coordinator.
Couldn't agree more.
So, Popper, I kept you for a little bit longer than I said I would, and I really appreciate
great conversation.
All your thoughts. And are you guys still doing the $1 deal for Black Friday?
No, it ran out last night, but you can still come and join us at The Athletic. Come read me. Lots of content coming your way.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't recommend subscribing to The Athletic enough. You're simply not maximizing your football viewing experience by not subscribing to The Athletic, in my opinion. And that's Popper, of course. It's Robert Mays, Nate Tice, Bruce Feldman. They do great work. Dane Brugler as well for the draft. So, The Athletic has crushed it and continues to crush it. So, Popper, appreciate it, man. I hope you have a wonderful home stretch of the season. You guys get to go home for Christmas this year, or doing everything?
Well, flying to Indy on Christmas, 3 p.m. flight. And then game at Indianapolis on the day after Christmas, Monday Night Football. So that's what it is. I flew to Houston on Christmas last year. It's just like I got to go home for Thanksgiving though, back east to Connecticut. So I got to see my family and everything, which was really nice. So
good, man. We I think people kind of take for granted what media members do for this sport. So can't thank you enough
for all of you. That's what we do it for all of you.
Appreciate it, Popper, man. You have a good one.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Steven.
Yep.